So yeah, I think they're great, and maybe some point I'll need to go into YouTube. I can take them and I can video clip out parts of them as well, if I need to for another class. We're supposed to be remote unless there's some dramatic change in the status of the way we're fighting this virus. We're supposed to be remote through spring 2021.
Wow.
20% of our classes, the ones that really can't be taught remote, are going to be brought back, and some of those are like things like telemedia and nursing and paramedics. I'm not exactly sure how they're doing some of it, theater, although they're getting more creative with remote. They're teaching art, and they're going to be doing ceramics online now. So like
Professor
clay, they're going to deliver the clay to people's houses, and then there's going to be a way for them to drop off the stuff to get fired and then pick it up all without touching each other and everything. So they're still like that. We're forging ahead. That's not the right word. Forging. Yeah, we're forging ahead, you know, with this whole remote learning and just trying to figure out how we can make some difficult things work, so that people can still have art classes and everything. But some stuff will have to be in person, and then they're going to need more rooms to do that, and they're going to need, you know, personal protective equipment for everyone and smaller classes. You know, maybe only 6 students in a room, so the airspace and everything is adequate.
Professor, is it final that spring 2021 is remote? Like final for everyone in Southwestern?
For Southwestern College, and the president made that decision, but they've always made the decision under the understanding if something were to dramatically change, we get a vaccine and everybody's able to take it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can all, and that happens in January. Our president is more than willing to suddenly send everybody back. It's actually pretty easy to send everybody back. That's what we're all used to. What's been really, really hard was making this shift to remote, where none of us, teachers and students, don't have the right resources. We don't have the right equipment. Southwestern is more equipped because we had such a big online tutoring program already, but most colleges weren't equipped for all this online learning at all. Our college, you know, really rallied to get these Chromebooks out and Wi-Fi spots out, and we're still working on getting more out. We sent out over 1,200 Chromebooks or something last semester. It's a crazy number of people that needed it. So it'll be a lot easier to just suddenly say, okay, we go back to class. That'll be easy. Which is why they're still having you enroll. Like when you enroll in a class in the fall, like it might say Tuesday, Thursday, such and such to such and such. The reason they're still giving them class times is if something were to dramatically change, we can easily send everybody back. And then you have a schedule. If everything were just online, there would be no schedule, there would be no way to send everybody back if things were to change. But her plan at this point, she made the decision for fall back in April, and it was correct. And we've been able to make really good plans. And so she made the decision for spring a couple weeks ago. And so, yeah, through spring 2021, so this fall, this spring. And again, if things change and we can go back, she's not going to keep us from going back. That's totally not her thing. But she doesn't want to have the chaos that we all went through in the spring semester. And that was chaos for anybody that went through it. It was nuts. I put in 14-hour days sitting at this computer and I couldn't keep up. It was terrible. And I know my students were having to learn, have instructors that were learning how to do this stuff. I'm still just a baby at it, but at least I've got some training under my belt now. All right, looks like we got just about everybody. I know we're down about 20 people today, but that's pretty normal. Anybody else got any questions?
I have one that's not really school related though. Is that okay?
Sure.
I wonder what caused the fire to happen on the ship.
It's a really good question. I don't know if we'll ever find out.
Wait, you said it's a naval ship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said it was a fall in the engineering section because one of my friend is on the Navy. He's on that ship, and then they said I think one of electricity was kept plug?
Yeah, and I heard that their normal fire suppression system that's normally on like on that amphibious type of boat happened to be off because of the type of work they were doing. They needed it to be off because they were welding or doing something in that area, and they had a lot of cardboard boxes that subsequently caught on fire. Like they had a bunch of things that led to it being an out of control fire. Fires on a ship are not unheard of, but out of control fires are pretty rare.
My friend's husband works in NASCO, and he was saying it was like an explosion on the ship that got created from what you said. It
They
turned
had a
into a really
fire
bad
that went
explosion.
out. Well, they had a
Yeah.
fire that they suppressed, but it didn't totally suppress. But then they had a secondary explosion from the first fire or something. Yeah, and then it made it really hard to fight. And then there was all the cardboard boxes and everything in between, I guess. It was extraordinary. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of investigations on the Navy side, and because the civilians were involved, there'll be some cooperation. But some stuff we may never know because we also don't want to make public like any vulnerabilities in our ships, for strategic purposes. For our enemies. So there'd probably be some stuff we just don't know. Whatever we're told. Even the people that are on board. I have a friend that used to serve on USS Denver. That's an amphibious assault craft carrier.
What's the name, Doc? I used to be stationed in USS Denver.
He was a dentist.
What's the name, Doc?
DeLuca.
Huh?
Captain DeLuca. He was a dentist.
No, probably.
He's my age, so he's since left to Denver, and he's been stationed in Florida for a really long time now.
Oh, okay.
But he lived in Coronado for some time. We went to high school together.
No, I think I heard his name because I was stationed in Naval Dental Center too.
Yeah, he was on the Denver in the mid-90s.
No, okay. I was gone.
Late 90s. 90, around that time, like 97 or 8, something like that, I think is when he was on the Denver.
What's his specialty?
Dental school first.
What's his specialty now, Doc?
He still does dentistry.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess the Denver always needed a lot. He said whenever they went underway, the Marines, they had to just fill teeth like crazy until they got to wherever they were dropping the Marines off. He said the Marines always had really bad teeth, but they would wait for them to get on board because they knew that the dentist would just treat them around the clock with their equipment. And then they would ensure that they were going to get deployed with good, healthy mouth.
When I went a long time ago, this one, because first couple weeks and all through boot camp, they'll have to give you dental work, or they pulled this one dude's and he talked. He would not stop talking. He wouldn't shut up, and he yelled.
Oh no, they took his tooth?
I think the guy was under sedation.
Oh.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
So when they gave him,
they
pulled his front tooth.
They're sleepy and they'll talk
They
a
took
lot.
my dad's front tooth in Korea. They pulled a healthy tooth actually. So all right, well we'll go back to we'll leave the military. We can talk about that in office hours after class.
I'm sorry.
And we're going to pick up on drugs, which is still related. Like we're talking about, they're like, oh, he's probably sedated, right? So there was probably like GABA involved, right? Some kind of anesthetic, something that might block a sodium channel so he wouldn't be feeling pain in his mouth at the time, right? And if the sodium channel is blocked, then you can't get the threshold and you don't get an action potential, and then the nerve never sends its signal, right? So anyways,
S Shapiro, I'm sorry.
boom, boom, boom. Right
I have
to
a
class.
question. I'm sorry. You said that there was some assignments that you opened, or is it just learning? Was there assignments?
Yeah, no, there's not going to be any assignments to hand in at this point. There's so few days left. Any assignments you haven't done or you want to perfect, turn those back in. But there are videos. Like, let me click over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to find them, and I don't know what.
You have to go. It only lets you click through them like in order because I didn't want people accidentally watching the videos all out of order because it would get all screwed up. So I did something I've never done before. Nor was I taught how to do it in my class because it's a Canvas thing. But let me share screen.
Because you said those videos are going to be part of our test, right?
Yeah, the video is definitely part of your test.
Okay.
Let me do share screen.
Thank you.
Share screen, course module, share. All right. So like I made unit 4, right? So we finished and, we did eating to live and breath of life. And some of you guys are still like nailing that in. And we took our exam 3. And now we're into our last unit, which is going to be a selected drug study. And we've got alcohol. I'm still doing a little bit of chapter 16 of pharmacokinetics. I'm finishing that today. And then alcohol and marijuana and nicotine. What I had made videos during the semester when we first went remote in the spring. And so I had not intended to reuse these, but in the interest of time, I did. So what I did is, for example, it starts with a lecture outline. And so you can see where I was going with the lecture, what I was going to be talking about, like the main points. If I use like vocabulary words and things like that, I tried to put everything into this lecture outline. And then next. And then it goes into the first video, and the lecture outline is going to go along with the videos. So that way you can have both out when you do it. And the thing about the modules is I made them so they're locked. Hopefully I did it right. Some of you may have watched the videos already, in which case before I locked them, and that's okay. But make sure you get to watch all of them. So you have to complete them. It's going to have like a little circle, like you'll have to at least click on all of them then in order, whether you watch them all the way or not. But if you go from lecture outline, you have to at least click on it before it'll let you go into part 1 of the video, before it'll let you go into next. It'll say, it won't let you go next until you've at least like clicked on it and gone through it. You won't be able to just come to modules and click anywhere you want until you've watched everything once. This Discovery Channel video, I wanted to show you guys. I have a little thing. This is not a required video. It's a really great video though. It was made by the Discovery Channel, and it does 2 things. It follows this man having a heart attack, and it follows this, which does really great and visuals and explanations of what causes 90% of most heart attacks. It's just really great video footage. It's animated, but it was early Discovery Channel stuff, and they did a great job with it. And then they also have a second segment where they just look at alcohol. And since this was the alcohol chapter, and they follow this, it's fictional, but they follow this young man named Greg Moore, and he's in England, and he just got a promotion at work, and they gave him a cell phone, which is kind of funny because cell phones have evolved so quickly in the last decade. So like they gave him a cell phone, which is like this big thing. And he's got this promotion. He's going to go celebrate after work with his friends. And the girl that he's always wanted to ask out, bumps into him, and he asks her out for a drink, and she says yes. Right? And the movie starts. But what it does is it follows him through a night of drinking, and it explains like from the neurons what's going on in his stomach, what's going on, how he's metabolizing it, the anesthetic effects, the things going on in the liver, the hangover. It does a really good job, but it does it under a fun storyline. It shows how the cerebrum is affected, the cerebellum, get down to the brainstem, and then eventually the brainstem's affected as well. And as his brain is getting more and more saturated with the alcohol, and the alcohol is affecting the GABA and causing all the neurons to sedate, right? They're all getting hyperpolarized, and so they can't fire anymore. And he passes out eventually, but it's a pretty good little video. The problem is I cannot get this. I'm submitted it to get it closed captioned, but I can't find it in a closed caption format. And the only way I can get it is interlibrary loan is actually, I make no joke about it, it's available as a VHS tape, which I still can't play in a closed caption format. So I can't make it required. But if you go over to the page, it'll play right in our thing as well. But I wanted to go over here because even though it's not closed caption, they've done a nice job with it. They actually have a transcript of pretty much everything that they're saying, all the dialogue that's going on in the video. And it goes through John and his, everything that the narrator is saying in the film is actually in this little transcript. And so it goes into Greg. Maybe his name is Craig. I don't know. So but it's not perfectly ADA accessible, so I can't make it required. But it's great review of everything that's in the video that I've made. It's just done in a nice storyline. And again, you can just play it here. but it says closed caption, but it's not really closed caption. You know, it's computer generated closed captions. Those aren't ADA compliant closed captions. So it does have some closed captions, but as you know, closed captions can get things really wrong. Like text to speak, that's text to speech to text. That's all that is. So it makes errors, even though they say it's closed caption, it's not truly. So I've learned, you know, in my class this summer that that's not accessible to maybe somebody that is visually impaired or something like that, that is relying on certain equipment, right? So, but then I've got videos on, what I did was I took the 2 chapters. There's a chapter in the Orange Book on marijuana, and there's a chapter on nicotine. And I used to teach them 2 separately. The last couple semesters, I've realized there's so much similarity and overlap the way we discuss them. They're both done through inhalation. They have similar ways that they work. And then there's ways that they're very different that should be distinguished. And I found it's better to actually teach them together as one unit. And it'll be pulling from the 2 orange chapters. And I've got the 2 videos on that. So there's the first video, and I think it's actually 4 videos on. A whole bunch of videos. It goes through smoking, talks about everything. Let me get there. Yeah, so then I've got it broken into 4 videos to cover marijuana and nicotine because I can combine them into one big thing. And today I'm going to talk about pharmacokinetics, and then if time permitting, I'm going to start going into stimulants and opiates. And Orange Book. Every single chapter of the Orange Book has a lecture outline. So there's a pharmacokinetic chapter that goes with chapter 2, the marijuana, chapter 6, nicotine, chapter 7, alcohol, chapter 3. I already placed the alcohol one. I'm going to put the marijuana and the nicotine one. I'm going to try to embed them in the video, in front of the videos. And when you get down in here, these are the Orange Book. And so, for example, chapter 3, alcohol. So if you click on these, it'll bring you into the actual page I scanned. It's a JPEG. It'll bring you into the actual page. So this is the book, right? He's got the chapter objectives. He's got an interesting quote that he always starts things off with. And then you can just click through next. You can read the chapter. If you want to actually read the Orange Book chapters, you can read them this way if you don't own the book at this point. And I just wanted to show you some features of the Orange Book. So it has a built-in study guide. Let me just close some stuff so I don't have to keep scrolling. So we got lecture outlines that go with the chapters. I do have a table of contents, and so you can see what chapter is what. Like if you're not sure what chapter is something you want to, there's something in the book you want to read about. It goes through the. Right, it's got the whole table of contents and everything, the cover. I scanned literally the entire book.
Thank you so much for doing that.
I own like 60 or 70 copies, and that's how many people I have in the class, so I don't feel like I'm violating any like rules whatsoever. Like I literally own all the copies that I'd be like, I would be handing to you guys to use. And it's out of print. At any rate, when you get down in here, there's actually a study guide. So there's, I'm going to rename, hopefully eventually, they won't just be scanned image 191, scanned image 192. I'm going to rename them, but I don't have time this semester. So there's actually a thing, but for each thing, so study guide chapter 2, this was built in. This was what the author originally did with the book. He built a study guide for every single chapter. So this is chapter 2. This is, say, the biologic basis of drug. This is like their version of pharmacokinetics. Talks about our chapter 15 and 16, really. And he's got all the vocabulary words. What are they? You know, he's got the.
Okay.
It also has true, false if I get there. Apparently, there's a lot of vocabulary in this chapter. There we go. Summary of all the key concepts. It's pretty thorough. Then he's got little multiple choice. You know, so you can, great for kinesthetic learning or just see if you've picked up stuff. He may not have emphasized the same material I'm emphasizing, so I would say look at that multiple choice after you've watched the video. Right, I'm using his book, but I didn't write it. And look at these, you know, which one has the which route of administration is the fastest? Oh, we had that on our last test. Right, so this is a great source of questions, maybe for true, false, and everything. And then there's the answer key that goes with it. So Drugs in Life study guide and Drugs in Life answer key. So there's actually answer keys that go with every chapter. So here's chapter 6, and it has, what are the multiple choice, the true, false, and so on. If anybody finds an error, let me know. Maybe put that in the Q&A. I know that there is a couple typos, I think, in the multiple choice or in the true, false somewhere in this. Oh, I'm missing a page. Oh, there's chapter 1. All right, chapter 2, and so on. That worked. So where can you find the videos again? So let me show you. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to go into our homepage like you normally would. Like when you come into class, you always come in, you've got my announcements, right? Hopefully you'll come along. Yeah, all that early stuff, learn how to learn and everything, the cell, the nervous system. Now we're in unit 4. So I've got it all built here. Just click on the first one. Right here, lecture outline, just click on it. It'll bring in the lecture outline and you can just then click through. The videos are all embedded in here.
Okay.
And I haven't necessarily moved them all over into, I don't know if I moved them over from, I don't think I moved them over to YouTube. They would have been in my YouTube that I created for the last semester. But I embedded them all here. So if I were to redo it, I would embed them with a smaller embed. That's easier for people trying to view it on a phone. I learned that this semester as well. Yeah. I've learned so much while I took the class, but some of this stuff I was designing while I was taking the class, and then like a week later, I was like, well, that would have been really useful like a week ago when I was making the videos to put up for this has been my semester. This has been my life for the last little bit. So, yeah, so that's where you'll find everything. And again, I think I have it locked, so you have to go through it in order, so that way you won't get screwed up and watch the videos out of sequence. But once you've clicked on them all, then you can re-watch them in any order you want. When you take an online, like a purely online class, you have to go, like you have to link module to module to module to module, like you can't like go, you're forced to go through the pages in one way. Like you don't even get to see that module view. Like I get you guys to see, because we're remote, we're not online. So there's a little distinction. They don't ever meet. All right, so any more
Professor,
questions?
sorry, before we start lecture fully, I just want to let you know that I might have to leave the class a little early. I have to take my dad to work because we share my car. So
it's good
this
I'm
will not be
recording.
long.
And again, you're going to want to get notes from 2 classmates because, maybe not everything records or something happens. Just because you're seeing the video doesn't mean everything comes through. So you might
Okay.
want to do that too.
All right, thank you.
That's one thing I need to do next in the fall semester is find ways to encourage you guys to be able to have the normal camaraderie that happens in school, like the normal social life that you get studying with classmates and having classmates to talk to, and have more things related to that, like, force us to have some discussions, maybe asynchronously in discussion boards or something where we get to relate with each other more. But I'm learning. Oh, that's another thing I mentioned to somebody on Tuesday. I'm gonna make it anonymous. I'm making an anonymous survey. I want to kind of find out from you guys a little bit what was working, not working with this semester, technology. How'd you like Quizlets? I don't know, whatever. I know the primer needs pictures, but I'm sure some of you will tell me that. Unfortunately, I didn't have all the ones I had were copy protected. I couldn't use them. I have to look for new ones. But I'm sure that you will have comments, good and bad, right? So tell me good things too, because maybe people will easily tell me the bad things, but then maybe there's something that nobody mentioned they liked, and I just think it's inconsequential, and I take it out, and then out of the course with this remote learning, and it turns out there was something that was actually really good that you actually appreciated. So whatever it is, just like I'll be making a survey that'll show up somewhere in the next few days. I'll have that made and put up and it'll be anonymous, so I won't know who submitted what. So don't worry about, you know, the brutality of it. I won't belt to like no and like be like, well, screw them. We take that off your grade or something. No, it's going to be completely anonymous. I want to get some truthful feedback because I've been doing this now for the semester. Like, what would it be amount to about a semester? A few weeks of the spring and then the 6 weeks. And I'm kind of like, when I was a regular teacher, I got feedback from you guys all the time when I first started teaching, when I perfected being in classroom. At the end of every class, I'd hand out like 3x5 cards and say, tell me, you know, tell me what was good about class. Tell me something bad about class. Write down 3 important points you got. So I learned to gauge what people were learning, what they weren't learning. And I became a good in-person teacher. And I can be a better remote teacher. That much I know. So look for that. It'll be out there. And anything else in the chat? All right, so let me share screen again, but this time with my iPad. My neighbor's Samsung is up again. They keep showing up at randomly. I don't know what neighbor it is though. This is pretty much where we left off last class. Like we were talking about the pharmacokinetics and we were looking into the idea that we had the different routes of administration and we went deep into the routes. And then we talked a little bit about absorption, and which meant that it was entering your bloodstream. And we saw like a little bit about how the different routes, how absorption, the speed with which it and the amount of which entered the bloodstream and how much of it got to the brain could be affected by the route. So it wasn't just that it was like, oh, hey, we've got a dozen different ways to deliver a drug. It's that different deliveries have different consequences. And so as a physician, I would prescribe it by the route that would be most appropriate for their disease state, for the type of drug. Is it a medication that can survive the stomach? Like insulin is a very fragile protein. And when it hits the pH of the stomach, it completely breaks down just like a piece of meat would. So you can't give somebody insulin orally because it would never get to their body. It would never absorb to their bloodstream because it would get destroyed in the stomach, right? And so that's why, for example, with insulin, you're forced to have to do some sort of parenteral route, right? Where you're going to have to inject it. And that's why people inject insulin. And we've tried to develop all kinds of different preparations of insulin that would survive the stomach, because obviously it would be a lot better for someone not to have to inject daily. But we've never been able to develop a type of insulin that could do that, for example, right? So now we try to develop different forms of insulin that maybe you might only have to inject it once a day instead of every 2 or 3 hours, because that would still be better, right? And so we're still focused on now we can only do one route, but now we're focused maybe the drug within that route. Maybe we can extend its half-life so the patient can have an easier time taking it. Maybe they only have to inject themselves a couple times a day instead of every day. Or maybe we move in the direction as we've done with the pumps, right? Where you can hook somebody up to a medication like an insulin pump. It has a little catheter and they just wear it and they don't have to inject themselves. They just push on the device and the device just injects them, and they just change the catheter every so often. And so we've worked at technology to make it, right? But sometimes we can deliver a medication by mouth, but maybe if we do it like an antibiotic, I mentioned, I can deliver it by mouth and then it's going to go to every single part of the body, even the parts that don't need it. But maybe the infection is very isolated, and maybe I can deliver it directly, like it's an ear infection. Maybe I can deliver those otic eardrops, right, directly to the ear. And then we don't have to worry about it spreading as much to other parts of the body and causing more side effects. And that's actually something I want to go over with you guys, is the idea of side effects. Somebody submitted their project already, and they were using the word side effect in. And to find it. So we use this word, side effect. So when you take a drug, and it's prescribed, like, let's say I have a drug, I have an illness, let's say I have high blood pressure. Right, that's an illness. And then my doctor prescribes a medication to treat my illness, right? So then they're gonna prescribe a med, right? And that medication is going to, my problem is my blood pressure is too high. So, right, so they're gonna prescribe a med that's gonna lower my blood pressure and bring it back into the normal, what we call physiologic range, right? The normal pressure that you're supposed to have as a human. It's like a normal range, not too low, not too high. Right, so they're going to prescribe a med, and that's going to lower my blood pressure. Right, so they prescribe the drug to lower my blood pressure. That's the effect. That's what we want from the drug. Maybe I have in pain, and they prescribe a drug to decrease my pain. Right, that's great. As it turns out, most drugs, they treat the problem, but they sometimes have unwanted effects that aren't related to what we're trying to achieve, right? When you have an unwanted effect of the drug, that's what we call a side effect. What it's doing, like it's lowering my blood pressure, that's it being therapeutic. That's its therapeutic effect. It's doing what it's supposed to do. This drug works, they prescribe it to me, it lowers my blood pressure. But maybe, for example, this is a good example, some blood pressure medications, this is why some people have to try different medications. Different drugs can have different side effects in different people. So you have to kind of find the one that works right for the person, that has a therapeutic effect with the least amount or no side effect. And for example, someone might take a medication to lower their blood pressure, and then they get this persistent, right, it doesn't go away, dry cough, a few times a day. Under COVID, cough, who coughed, right? This persistent dry cough, it's a side effect. As soon as they go off the drug, their blood pressure goes back up, and then you know what? Their cough comes back. Their cough goes away. As soon as the drug is gone, their cough goes away. It is an unwanted effect. Some people don't get that effect. Some people do. Then they sometimes try a different blood pressure medication. They're like, well, it's working, but sorry, you have a cough. That sounds really annoying. Let's see if we can find a medication that has a good therapeutic effect that doesn't give you side effects, right? Doesn't give you unwanted effects from a drug. Some unwanted effects can be quite severe or difficult to manage. Some like a side effect of some antidepressants, they can have unwanted side effects, weight gain, right? Something like that. You took the drug to get rid of a depression, and then you have weight gain, or maybe it causes erectile dysfunction. Got rid of my depression, and now I've got a secondary problem. Right now, do I have to take a medication for that? What's going on? Cough. I do have cough variant asthma. And I'm coughing way less since the ship fire is over. Now only a couple times a day. All right. So, right, side effects. Just this idea that they're there and that you can have side effects. There's another thing that can go on with side effects, and I want to mention this, and this is the danger of the more drugs you take, or if you're on a drug and you don't tell your doctor you're taking it, or you've got multiple prescribed drugs and one doctor prescribes it and you fill that at one pharmacy, and then another doctor and you fill it at a different pharmacy, and they all don't know you're taking a drug. Because one of the problems that you can have in side effects is something related to when you're taking more than one drug, where you can have something called a drug-drug interaction. And it's really a type of side effect that it's only happening when the two drugs are in your system. And when we test a drug for how it works in the human body, you find patients that only have the one problem because you want to control to make sure the drug is fixing the one problem. So, and you want to make sure the drug is safe and you don't want it mixing with other drugs. So when we run a drug for safety, for the most part, initially it's all done on a patient that only needs that one drug. And so we have thousands of patients, they only need that one drug. We figure out the therapeutic doses, we figure out the safe doses, you know, where the LD50 is. I haven't talked about the LD50, lethal dose. And eventually it makes it to market. Now they can't possibly test, eventually it'll be in trials where the patients are on multiple drugs and you might end up with a warning. It'll say, you know, don't prescribe it in a patient that's already taking this other drug. For example, I could use this as an example. Some of the erectile dysfunction drugs, if they're taken at the same time, it's funny I'm talking about this. If they're taken at the same time with a blood pressure medication, you can have a drug-drug interaction that causes death. Their blood pressure drops to 0 and they just die. Right? That would be a pretty bad drug-drug interaction. That would be a pretty bad side effect, death. And interestingly enough, you take the erectile dysfunction drug alone, not causing death. You take the blood pressure medication alone, it's not causing death. You take them together, drug-drug interaction. That's a pretty severe version of a drug-drug interaction. It might not be something that severe. You know, maybe it just causes you to get some nausea, right? Or something like that. The more drugs that you're taking, right, the more chemicals that are in your body, the more likely eventually some drug in your body is going to interact with another drug in your body, and you're more likely to get drug-drug interactions. So when we prescribe medications, this is what we call polypharmacy. Poly is like many. So if you've been prescribed many drugs, you're more likely to have an unwanted side effect, including especially a drug-drug interaction. The more drugs you're taking simultaneously, the more likely you are to have some sort of unwanted side effect. How does this relate to like illegal drugs or illicit drugs? And yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you hear people say they're doing a speedball.
Right,
like,
that's exactly. You guys, do you know what a speedball is?
No.
Matt, do you know what a speedball is?
yes, I've had a friend who died from it. He overdosed.
Yeah, what's a speedball?
Heroin
You know what
and
drugs are in it?
cocaine. Heroin
again?
and cocaine.
Yeah, cocaine and
Heroin.
heroin. Okay.
Yep.
So actually, we're going to take a look at this. Heroin by itself, very, very deadly drug. So deadly that we only would have something like this in a hospital where you have a doctor or nurse like around you and you'd be hooked up to monitors. And even then we wouldn't use heroin. We'd use a less potent form of it like morphine. We'll talk about opiates just, before we're done here. Cocaine, also another really deadly drug. Very, very easy to overdose on cocaine. Now what happens is when you mix these two together, you're taking one deadly drug and another deadly drug. Is not just that they're deadly, the fact that they're mixed together, now you have the ability to get a drug-drug interaction. And some of these drug-drug interactions, as I said, they can be quite deadly. And when it comes to speedballs, extremely deadly, right? A lot of famous people in history have died of this combination. The comics like John Belushi, I don't know. There's a whole lot of them.
I think
Somebody's doing, isn't one of you doing a project where you were researching the different overdoses for, I thought somebody was doing that project this semester. Am I mistaken? I think somebody was doing that where they were looking at like all the different overdoses and things in what the different celebrities were on when they died.
I think
But usually when you look at it, it's not uncommon, right? When you get that coroner report, right? Somebody does die. It's not surprising when you get that coroner report back where there's more than one drug in their system. And you go, oh, well, they were drug users. Maybe, maybe not, but maybe they're not big drug abusers. Maybe on that day though, they did take drugs in combination. And when you take drugs in combination, you're more likely to die because of this deadly drug-drug interaction problem. Right.
And they're also, they're street too. So they're not, you don't know what they're cut with.
Right. That's a whole nother issue. Right. But this is just straight up. Even if you had pure versions of cocaine and pure versions of heroin, like you went and jumped into the jungle and you went up to Afghanistan and you took it and you knew it was completely pure, it would just still be so much more deadly because of drug-drug interactions. Even just for example, alcohol is a pretty deadly drug. It's got a pretty, I'm going to talk about this word, LD50. It's got a very poor LD50. I'll define that in a second. One of the reasons why, we get a lot of alcohol overdoses is people then take, they take alcohol with cocaine, or they take alcohol with an opiate, or they take alcohol with methamphetamine. Right now you start mixing, again, as soon as you start mixing alcohol with any other drug, you're more likely to have a death from it. Even alcohol and nicotine are more deadly together than alone. Right, so it's, don't underestimate this idea that you always want to be taking the least amount of drug. That doctors, you'll hear anti-vaxxers and things, one of the things they try to promote is that doctors are somehow make money off of people taking drugs. First of all, we're not allowed to. That's against every state and federal law. There's Stark Acts and things, that a law that says that we're not even allowed to get any kind of kickback. I can't even refer someone to a physical therapist and get $1 for referral. That's 100% illegal and against the law. There's a lot of laws that doctors can't do. And one thing is for sure, in our medical training, we learn about drug-drug interaction and polypharmacy. And one of the things they stress all the time in our training is polypharmacy is dangerous, and you should always be trying to lower your patient's dosage and lower the amount of drugs that your patient is on so that they're on the least amount of dose and the least amount of drugs at any given time. That is actually part of what we're trained to do. So to hear someone say that my job is to put you on tons of drugs and keep you on them is, well, it's a lie. But it makes good sound bites on the internet and memes. All right. We don't want to do this because we understand the danger of that. So you always do want to tell your doctor if you're taking a drug, legal or not. You do want to let your doctor know so that they're prescribing medication for you. They might know about a drug-drug interaction. They might prescribe a different drug knowing.
Actually, I'm in class right now.
There we go. I just need that. All right, so polypharmacy. Now, LD50. I want to talk about LD50 because before we get much further, because I keep mentioning it. So LD50. Let me get a better color. Every drug, legal or illegal, has what's called almost every drug has what is known as its LD50, and that stands for the lethal dose for 50%. And LD, right, lethal dose, and then 50, meaning 50 or half. So what the LD50 means is if you gave this drug to 100 people and half of them died, the dose that you would give that caused half the people to die from that dose, that's the LD50. It's the dose that kills half the people you give it to. The dose of a drug right? So you give it to 2 people and one of them dies. Then you give it to 2 more people and one of them dies. You give it to 2 more people and one of them dies. Right? That's the LD50. That every time you give it to 2 people, one of them dies. One of them lives, one of them dies. Now, we don't know that they live well. They could be injured or damaged in some way, but they're not dead. And so we would set that's the LD50. And so when we look at drugs, maybe I am going to talk a little bit about this. Like in the United States, our drugs are on what we call a schedule. You see like Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4, and so on drugs. And what that has to do with is whether it's legal or not, right? Whether you're prescribing them or not. And like Schedule 1 drugs can't be prescribed. They're just illegal. They're no drug benefit or anything like this. Right? And then we go down through the schedule, and eventually, whether you get off the schedule, as you go down through the schedule, they're supposed to be less and less addicting, less and less deadly, right? And so you're supposed to have at the top, it's supposed to be like a bad LD50. So that would be why it should be illegal, why you would want to have it prescribed. If it is prescribed, maybe like some of the number 2s, you could only use them like in a hospital setting because they do have bad LD50. So you want to take it in the hospital in case there's a problem, right? And then as you get down to like a Schedule 4, the LD50 is improving. But all of these drugs that are on the schedule, these are all drugs that require a prescription. All drugs that require prescriptions, by the nature, the reason they're on the schedule, the reason they need a prescription is generally they have a bad LD50. And that means you can die from a small error in taking it. So in order for it to get off the schedule, that's what we call over-the-counter.
Yes.
Right? And over-the-counter drugs, they have what we consider to be like a good LD50. And what that would mean is, let's say you woke up this morning and you had a headache. And you took 2 Tylenol, 2 extra strength Tylenol, like the biggest dose. And then you get busy and you're doing something, and an hour later, half an hour later, you still got the headache. And you go to, you've ever had this happen to you and you've been busy and you go to yourself, did I take it? Did I already take it? Oh, I still got the headache. Maybe I didn't take the drug. So I'll take another one. So you take another one. If that was a drug that's fine if it's, say, Tylenol. Because Tylenol has a pretty good LD50. You have to almost take like a whole bottle of it before it'll start to be deadly. Right? So if I accidentally took 1 or 2 extra, not too big a deal. Pretty good LD50. I take an extra, maybe my headache goes away. I don't die from it. I don't get damaged. My brain doesn't shut down. My organs don't shut down or something like that. Actually, let me show you this. We're going to talk about opiates. I wanted to talk about opiates, so I want to show you something. Why opiates are so deadly, or why we've been. Okay, this is these are the size of. I'm too young. I lived in the 80s and 90s when crack cocaine was really prominent, and these are the size. These are crack vials. They're about the size of like your pinky. Like give you like, I should have a ruler next to them, like the size of about your pinky. And these are the drugs that are listed here. These are opiates. Right. So this comes from the heroin poppy, and I'll be talking about that. It comes from a flower. We call these all derived from the same flower that grows mostly only in the high altitudes of Afghanistan, and the only place in the world that they grow, for the most part, natively. Right? And so this comes from a flower, and then they extract this molecule from the flower, and eventually we can refine it, and we can have these molecules like heroin. So what you see in these vials is, this is the LD50 for each of these drugs. This is the lethal dose for 50% of the people who take it. Okay, so heroin, literally, this is like a dusting. These are just like a few grains. Like this is the amount of stuff in there. If it's a small, you can't appreciate the crack vial, but you'd put more salt on your eggs probably if that was salt grains. You take that much heroin, you're dead. That's a purified form of it. Then chemists made other versions of it, right? Other versions because doctors needed it in the hospital setting, like fentanyl. Fentanyl was only made to be used in the operating room. That was what it was for. So you're already been intubated. You've got a physician assigned to you, an anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist. They're waiting there. If you stop breathing or something happens, like with an overdose, like your brainstem stops sending the signal to breathe, they're there to help you. They can administer oxygen. They can administer antidote if they need to, right, in the operating room. Carfentanil. This was made for veterinarians. And not just any type of veterinarian. These guys were the veterinarians that work on the big animals. They work on like elephants. So if you're an elephant veterinarian and you need to do elephant surgery, if you give an elephant heroin or fentanyl, they have such a huge liver. It passes through their liver, and almost as quickly as you inject them, it passes through their liver with the first pass. And it breaks down, and even if you're injecting it, it's going to circulate through their liver very quickly, and it breaks down so quickly you can't keep the elephant sedated. So they went to the chemist and they said, chemist, we need something that's really, 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 really strong so we can give small amounts, we can give large amounts of it to our elephant and keep them sedated, right? But this is for a person. This is the LD50 for people, not for elephants, okay? So this is why people can die so easily of an overdose. People take the drug, Matt was saying something about counterfeit. It doesn't even have to be a counterfeit drug. So I could go to a dealer and they might have, you can get like say carfentanil and fentanyl, you can get it, the dealer can get that. And it's sometimes cheaper than say getting heroin to make something out of, maybe a pill, maybe the Vicodin pill. And so they're counterfeiting a Vicodin pill. Vicodin, to overdose on Vicodin, it'd be pills and pills in here. Several pills. It would take at least several pills to if this was Vicodin. A lot more drug than heroin or any of these things. But what a street dealer can do is they can take a bunch of nothing, starch and things that doesn't actually have Vicodin in it, but it's still an opiate. All these drugs are going to have the same action, more or less, because they all are going to bind to the same receptors and have the same effect. Just like how strongly it binds and how strong its effect is. Right, so they could take Vicodin, they don't have it, but then they could take fentanyl and they could mix that into a big batch of starch, right? And mix it up in their blender and then stamp out pills and then have the Vicodin stamp and everything put on them. And when the person takes it, it'll take away their pain. It's the opiate. They'll have the same effect. No problem. Except when they're mixing, like if one like extra, if an extra grain goes into one of the pills, that became like a deadly batch. And what they tend to do is they tend to use carfentanil because that's even cheaper for them to start with because it's such a small concentrated amount. And then they have to spread that carfentanil across many pills. If one pill has just a tiny, tiny, too big a dose of carfentanil, literally a grain's worth, that just became a deadly Vicodin counterfeit pill. Mm-hmm. And that's what they believe actually it's Prince probably died from a counterfeit Vicodin.
Yes.
He had a prescribed Vicodin. He actually got it at a pharmacy, but it turns out it was actually a counterfeit one that had been flooded into like the market from India or somewhere. And Walgreens or whoever bought it, not knowing it was counterfeit. So, because there is counterfeit medication. Yeah, Matt, yeah.
Yeah, it is. I was talking to my friend's a pharmacist for KP. And he's saying that carfentanil is so deadly. He's all that is the most deadly. He's all ridiculous. He's all other pharmacies are getting a hold of him. And they'll prescribe them because they're not checked.
Right. And so think about that. Literally, this is like a salt grain. This is sort of magnified here. Like that salt grain, you ingest that much, you're dead.
Yeah, that's what he said.
All right. So that's why, like, when we look at LD50s, right? And again, when we look at that lethal dose, that was determined when you're looking at, you took just the one drug, the lethal dose. So if you start mixing, right? And you start getting these drug-drug interactions, like you're saying, you're taking heroin and cocaine, you're taking alcohol and methamphetamine, right? You're mixing the drugs together. Who knows where the LD50 is going to fall? Generally, it's not going to be better. It's going to be a worse LD50, meaning even a smaller dose is going to be more deadly, right? Where a better LD50, you have to take the whole bottle to die. A bad LD50, you take 1 grain of it and die.
Yep.
Okay. So just wanted to put that out there. That's this idea of side effect, and we're going after therapeutic effect and trying not to have, and we're trying to minimize and diminish side effect.
And Professor,
Sure.
who like on that first list, the categories 1 through 4, that's the one that it has crack on there separate from cocaine, which makes no sense.
Oh yeah, I'll be talking about that. They have a different route of administration, so they are a little bit different. And at the molecular level, crack and crack cocaine is a little bit different. One has an extra hydrogen and chlorine attached to it.
Oh, and then
And so
one
it
that,
has a different, and that's why you can easily smoke crack, but it's you have to freebase and do all these things to smoke
yeah.
cocaine. So I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up during the cocaine epidemic, and you guys were growing up during the opiate epidemic. So I know my crack cocaine and my cocaine. So not that I ever took it. Right. So where I want to start talking though is we got this idea that you're going to administer it by the different routes. Some will go in faster, some will go in slower. Some routes will get faster to the brain, slower to the brain, right? Some are subject to the first pass effect. Some have to circulate around for a few minutes before they get to the liver and eventually start passing through the liver. And different routes affect the absorption rates. Now, once it's absorbed, when we talk about distribution, there's not too much to say about distribution, but I do have a little bit to say about distribution. Let me get a better color. I got red. Distribution. Right? This is the process of moving it around the body, like circulating it. And a couple of factors. Something, if it has to be able to dissolve in your blood to travel in your blood, right? So there's a couple of factors, right? We need to be able to dissolve in the blood. Remember, your blood is mostly water. So some things will easily go into water, and some things that are fat-like will have a hard time going into water. So if it is fat-like, a lot of drugs of abuse are fat-like. They have a hard time dissolving in blood. They have a hard time dissolving in water. So our body has special molecules in our blood. And these will attach to the drug. And then it makes it more hydrophilic. The protein is hydrophilic, and when this protein attaches to the protein like cloaks it in its hydrophilicity, right? It sort of just cloaks it, and now it can dissolve. As long as it's traveling with that protein, it can now dissolve in your bloodstream, and it can now transport all over our body. Because we do have molecules in our blood, like steroid molecules. They're very fat-like. They would have a hard time dissolving in our bloodstream, right? So we naturally have these special blood proteins. Just for a couple people that have sort of seen it in anatomy and physiology, right? These were like the albumins that you would have studied in your blood, right? These are some of the molecules, for example, that your liver is constantly making them. It's your blood, it's just like a part of your blood. So anytime a molecule that's not hydrophilic enough gets into your blood, it can be escorted, right? These special proteins, they attach to the drug and they escort it to its site of action, right? Where it's going to help deliver it to where it needs to go, right? Escort it to where it needs to go. right? Where we call it site of action, where it's headed. The cell that it wants to go bind to and tell it to do stuff, change its behavior. So for the most part, most things that if they can get into if you can put them into your vein, if you can absorb it from your gut, it's going to get into your blood, and then whether it's lipophilic or not, it's going to be able to travel around in your blood. So the hydrophilic things obviously can easily travel. Right, they easily disperse, they easily distribute, right? They easily travel. Obviously, the blood is water, and they love water, so they travel around easily. But even, right, the things that are lipo, or the things that are maybe more hydrophobic, right, that are going to have trouble in the water, no problem, because they're going to be able to attach to these special blood proteins, and then they're going to still be able to travel around in your blood. Right, our blood would be no good if it couldn't transport everything that we need. Right? So it transports everything. Now, once it gets to the site of action, though, the hydrophobic molecules, right? Hydrophobic molecules are lipophilic. So lipophilic molecules, they might need to attach to special proteins to get transported. But once they get to the site of action, once they find the cell, right, that's the site. Once they find the cell that they need to either go into or attach to, right, once they find that cell, they're going to have an easy time going through that membrane and interacting with the cell, right, because they're lipophilic, and, right, the cell is made out of lipo, right, the phospholipid bilayer, right, you've got the bilayer of lipids, the bilipos, right, so those drugs, even if they have to be escorted through the blood, once they get to the cells, they're going to cross quickly. Right? Alcohol is a good example. It just crosses through membranes really easily. And most drugs that you'll take, illegal or not, they're going to distribute just fine because our blood is designed, I guess, evolved to just do this, right? Transport things, remove a waste, a lipophilic waste, a lipophobic waste, transport a nutrient, right? A lipophobic nutrient, a lipophilic nutrient, doesn't matter. Your blood should be able to transport everything. Obviously, this relies on, you need to have a healthy heart, right? So if someone doesn't have a healthy heart, they might have trouble with the distribution of drug. You also have to have, the heart doesn't just pump the blood, right? It's pumping it through tubes, right? So you have to have all of the blood vessels. So you have to have healthy blood vessels to be able to distribute the drugs everywhere. And again, those of you that can watch the video that the beast within, it's in that list. It shows the man having a heart attack, the construction worker having the heart attack, and then it shows the next video is Greg Moore with the alcohol, and it actually shows the effect of the heart attack on the heart and how it affects the circulation and how it affects, if you were taking a drug, it couldn't distribute. And then the alcohol shows how the alcohol actually causes the heart to have problems sending its electrical signals. And in the video that I made for you, I talk about holiday heart syndrome. So, but we have to have this effective distribution system. You have to have a healthy heart. You have to have a healthy blood vessels. So then I'm drinking, affects my heart, and then I take another drug. Drug-drug interaction, maybe I'm more likely to die today, right? So again, distribution though, it relies on a healthy heart, healthy blood vessels, and you have to have the blood itself, right? It has to have all of its components, right? Like we need these special proteins and things in your blood, right? So as long as that's all working, we're going to distribute, everything distributes just fine. Now, as it's distributing, it's going to be acted on by enzymes. And there's going to be enzymes in the liver that are going to be acting on the molecules and going to be breaking them apart. And the fancy sciencey word the chemists would call that a catabolic reaction or a hydrolysis reaction or something. We're not chemists though. A physicist might call it a exergonic reaction. Breaking bonds. Anyways, the doctors and whatnot, we call this a metabolic reaction. And we're saying that this drug is going to be metabolized. The enzymes are going to be metabolizing or breaking apart the drug, right? The enzymes are going to be doing chemistry on these molecules that have gotten in our body. And these enzymes are going to be located in our liver. They're going to be located in our bloodstream, just like floating in our blood. Sometimes they're located in our organs themselves. They can be all over our body, but regardless of where the enzyme's located, it's going to have the same effect, which is it's going to begin metabolizing or breaking apart the drug. And this is moving us into the last step, which is elimination. So we've started with, we got to get the drug in, and then it's got to absorb. Now it's in. We got to have a route, select a route. It absorbs into our bloodstream. Now it begins distributing. As it's distributing, enzymes are acting on it, right? And it's being eliminated. Other things will be eliminating it too. We'll see, like my kidneys can just take the molecule and put it in my urine or something like that and just get rid of it and eliminate it that way. But a lot of the ways that we eliminate it is just to break it apart, and then it's the broken down parts will still be in your body, but the drug itself is now gone, right? Because it's been broken apart. And so let me show a little picture. So you're going to have like some kind of enzyme. Right? It could be located in your liver, could be located in your blood, some sort of organ, right? That part doesn't really matter. And as the drug, anytime it comes into contact with the enzyme, it's a pre-programmed reaction. Enzymes do one chemical reaction only, the reaction that they evolved to do, and that is it. And so they can only act on the one molecule. Other molecules bump into the enzyme, it won't do anything. Only for every drug, there's a unique enzyme that can break it down, right? And so that one, if a different drug circulates in, this is kind of cool. If a different drug comes by and it circulates by this enzyme, it'll just pass through until it goes and bumps into its enzyme, right? So that one drug will bump into this one enzyme that can act on it. And then when that happens, right, the enzyme is going to begin acting. Another color. And it's going to do a bunch of chemistry. And generally, it's going to be either it's going to break bonds or make bonds. That's what chemistry means. We have some chemistry majors in this class this summer. I do apologize for me really oversimplifying your science, but that's essentially what chemistry is, the study of making and breaking bonds. So this enzyme is going to make a bond, break a bond, and the drug's going to pass through. And when the drug passes back out, it's going to be changed. You know, it's going to be the drug, and maybe it looked like this. And looked like that, and it was circulating around, and it was circulating around, and it bumped into the enzyme. And by the time it gets, the enzyme's finished with it, the enzyme will have done chemistry on it and will have altered it. So what maybe comes out the other side is a new molecule. Maybe A's and B's. We had this thing, this molecule was all together, and here it is working. This is the actual molecule, this is the actual drug, this is the working drug, and then it passes through the liver, it passes through this enzyme, passes in the bloodstream, it comes into contact with this enzyme, the enzyme acts on it, splits it apart. This is no longer the drug. The drug has been eliminated, right? It's been metabolized. And now these things that are left over now, these breakdown products, we have to name them. They're not the drug. They're not called the drug. They're the breakdown products of the drug, right? These are the metabolites. That's what we call those, metabolites. some metabolites have their own drug actions. Some metabolites can still interact with the cell and keep having some of the same effects as the original drug. Some metabolites have their own actions and their own unwanted actions. Like, for example, a lot of the hangover, and sometimes when people drink like the red flushing, if you're a fair complexion person, you'll see when people drink, they tend to get reddish, like they look like they've been in the sun too long.
Oh, like they're allergic to it?
Yeah, they look like they're allergic to it or something. But what's really going on is that you're consuming alcohol, right? The alcohol is now circulating around the body, and then as the alcohol then gets in contact with enzymes, it then creates a new molecule. Like, for example, this molecule called acetaldehyde. It starts off as alcohol. Alcohol interacts with its special enzymes, and it turns into this other thing called acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde gives you headaches and makes your skin flush. It's a metabolite of alcohol, right? So sometimes in the process of breaking down, alcohol is a poison, and it has a very, very, very bad LD50. It doesn't take much to die from alcohol. Someone who hasn't been drinking recently and just drinks 6 or 7 beers, depending on their strength, in a few hours, they could put themselves into complete alcohol poisoning. Right? So alcohol is a really strong poison, a very bad LD50. Acetaldehyde has a better LD50, but boy, it has some really unwanted side effects. But your body doesn't care. It's going to break down this alcohol because it doesn't want to die. And if it leaves you with a hangover and some red flushing and things like that, okay, so be it. A lot of people think they're sick from the alcohol. Well, you wouldn't have these metabolites. You wouldn't have this acetaldehyde in you if you hadn't consumed the alcohol originally, right? So yeah, the alcohol is giving you the hangover, but indirectly. Now, in the alcohol chapters, I talk about the specific metabolism of alcohol. Here, I'm just using as an example, right, to explain, right, that things are going to be metabolized. They're going to pass through these enzymes on their way to being eliminated. And when you metabolize them, you're going to end up creating metabolites. And this brings me to another topic that I actually wanted to lecture on, which is a little bit about drug tests. And it actually even relates to these like COVID-19 tests where people say they're talking about false positives and false negatives and like, what is that? Why is it something wrong with the test if it's giving you certain false readings? So I want to talk about that. Before I do, we'll take a 10-minute break again. And stop share. Anybody got a question before I stop recording? Yeah. Decomposition, the word to decompose, it has a special meaning in science where particularly it's a bacterium or a fungus breaking and digesting those molecules, right? So when like a fungus or a bacterium breaks down a molecule, we call that decomposition. When it happens inside our body, when it's an enzyme made by a cell in our body, we call that metabolism. If you look in the chat window, somebody put the decomposition ? But it is the same concept, breaking down the elements. Yay, finals. No, finals August 30th. Holy cripes.
Wait, what did you say, Professor, about the?
I don't know, I saw something in the chat window that someone said something, but I want to make sure that's not a mistake there. But final is August 30th. I mean, July 30th.
I know, I was like, August 30th. I'm like, what?
July 30th, right? 9 a.m. Just doing our normal thing. So I'll just put that in the chat window.
Do you have to get the test accommodations list for
Yeah,
you?
so I've got your accommodations are in there, but I'm more concerned with you actually having time to study so that you can do okay on them.
Well, you can just say I did horrible last test.
Well, I know, but we want to make sure you didn't study yet. You hadn't done any of the Quizlets or any of that stuff. So
Yeah.
we got to get you're getting the apple in front of the horse. And
Okay.
all right,
My-
that was the wrong expression.
No, it's okay.
You're getting the cart in front of the horse. It's okay to put the apple in front. That helps the horse go. You're getting the cart in front of the horse.
I like your shirt.
Thanks. That's my Grateful Dead shirt.
I know. My neighbor across the street, he looks like Jerry Garcia.
That's funny.
He works for
I'm gonna hit. Let me hit the. Resuming. Anybody got questions in our little break? It's our break.
You went outside, right?
Yeah, I went outside. I walk around for like the 5 minutes. Well, I try to do it for 10 minutes because when I sit at the chair, I think the blood pools in my feet when I sit for so long. I'm not used to having to. I've never sat for a career ever. I've always walked around, so it's been.
Well, I know
hard.
you teach and you're walking around the whole time.
Right now, I just sit, and it's. I think I'm gonna get a stand-up desk probably. I don't know. I got to figure out something. Long term, I just can't sit like this. It's semester or two, I can handle it, but not the rest of my life. I don't know when this is going to be over. I know it's not the rest of our lives, but sometimes it seems like.
When do you think this whole pandemic?
Most pandemics seem to take about a year or two to for us to learn how to treat them and to learn how to contain it and all those sort of things. So,
Well, I know Pfizer just got approved. Like
we already have more treatment, so like the death rate will get better just because we'll have more effective treatment. It was a brand new virus. We didn't even know how to treat it yet. We just treated it, trial and error as we went. So we've learned a lot about it in the last 4 months, and like it spreads by air. We didn't know that back in March, and why the face masks now. But we thought it spread like the regular flu, like by touching surfaces. But this one's a little unique.
And do you think like the way that the government, like the way Trump has handled this is almost like a freaking joke?
Well, I think we'll be able to do a lot of, in the months and years to come, we'll be able to do a lot of looking back and saying, where did we run wrong and what could we have done better? But from my personal viewpoint, we have a lot of room for improvement when we go back this, because there will be another pandemic, and we shouldn't handle it the way we did this one. We should hopefully have something better in place.
Well, and also, like you'll see that now there's, I don't know what news, they're saying that they'll just have like a whole list of the, I think it's CNN saying all the coronavirus deaths, like they fluctuate so I don't know which one to rely on, because you'll see one.
Death rates are going to fluctuate depending on the community that's being infected. When a younger community gets infected, they'll have higher infection rates, but obviously fewer death rates. Some communities have higher comorbidities, like you're seeing some of the data with African American and Hispanic,
exactly.
And that's because they tend to have more comorbidity. For example, if you have hypertension or if you have diabetes, right, that puts you at a greater risk of dying from this virus that we know. The virus affects the heart. If you already have a problem with your heart, you have blood pressure problems. Now you have the virus and the blood pressure problems, right? Sort of like the drug-drug interactions. Like the more illnesses you have, the more likely the illnesses are going to interact in a more deadly manner. Yeah. So you'll see the things, what we'll be looking at over the next 6 months is when we start to not break it down by different groups, let's look at the overall rates and begin to then see which groups we need to protect more. We'll have a better way we'll know what to do better. But now today we're going to be still talking about drugs. Let me do my share screen again.
Don't forget to record.
Oh yeah, hit record. Share. Thank you, Matthew. Am I recording? More. I am recording, okay, because it says otherwise I hit pause, okay. All right, so I want to say something about drug tests, because drug tests are related to this idea of the elimination, the metabolism that's going on with our drugs. When we look at most drugs, when we look at most drug tests, the tests, like I was saying, they don't test for the presence of the drug, they test for the presence of the metabolite. A lot of drugs will leave your system very, very quickly. If I took cocaine today, the actual cocaine molecule will mostly be eliminated from my body by tomorrow. So if someone like an employer wants to screen me to see if I'm a cocaine user, if they test me tomorrow for cocaine, they might not discover that I'm a cocaine user. The cocaine's left my system. But if they test for a cocaine metabolite, maybe that metabolite will be present for 48 hours or something like that. So then they'll know that I was doing cocaine, 2 days before I went in for my interview, right? Or something like that. So we don't actually test for the drug because the original drug is going to be metabolized very, very quickly, right? That original drug is going to get broken down. So if you test for it, right, it's gone. Right? If you go to test for it, it's not there anymore. But if you test for the metabolite, those metabolites are going to have their own half-life, right? So metabolites have their own half-life. How long does it take for then 50% of that metabolite to be eliminated from your body, right? You got the half-life of the drug. How long for 50% of the drug to be eliminated? Well, how long for then, now you have metabolites. Each of those metabolites has its own unique half-life. And they tend to be pretty long half-lives because the body's converting it to less toxic things. Can have more time to eliminate it. So the metabolites are a good thing to test when we look at drug tests for, say, a pre-employment physical or going into the military or something like that. All right, just do a mute. That explains what my feet look like behind the cell. Yeah, get up and walk around. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about drug testing though, because I feel like you can't really take this class without addressing it a little bit. So one thing is most tests test the metabolite. There are some drugs that don't test for the metabolite. For example, National City Police, they have a drug test, a saliva test that they pull you over at a sobriety checkpoint. They can give you a breathalyzer to test your alcohol level. Alcohol breathalyzers, give some exceptions. That is not testing for metabolite, that's testing for alcohol, right? Not the metabolite. So here's an interesting thing. First of all, there's a difference between like a drug test for a pre-employment physical. I just want to know if my candidate is a drug user sometime in the last week or two, if they've been using drugs, right? If I'm a police officer and I pull you over for alcohol use, do I want to know if you used alcohol yesterday as the cop? Or maybe there's a different reason why I'm pulling you over. I might want to know if you're using the alcohol now. Or do you currently have alcohol? Not the breakdown of alcohol, not that you drink yesterday. Do you actually have actual alcohol molecules in your body now that are causing you to be impaired, right? That you might have a DUI and we need to take you off of the road, right? So that would be an example where we would not use a metabolite because we're trying to actually catch people with the actual drug in their system when we're doing like an alcohol breathalyzer. Another example was what I thought of it as I was writing this one. Oh, this is also a police thing. We actually have quite a few people this semester who are administration of justice majors, right? Law enforcement is your career goal, right? So that test would be testing for alcohol. National City Police, they have a marijuana saliva test, and it tests for THC. There's lots of different molecules in marijuana, what we call the cannabinoids or the cannabinoids, depending on your English accent. The different cannabinoids have different effects, THC is the one that's supposed to be having the more psychoactive effect. And so if I'm pulling you over to sobriety checkpoint and I think that you've been smoking marijuana, I don't want to know if you smoked marijuana 3 weeks ago. One of the cannabinoids, one of the metabolites of these. Remember I said it has a really long half-life. These metabolites can hang around for weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't want to know if I'm the police officer. I don't want to know that you did it 2 or 3 weeks ago. What I want to know is, are you impaired at this very moment? Like, did you just smoke a joint with your friend and then hop in the car 15 minutes ago, right? And it's still even absorbing into your bloodstream at this point, right? You're still getting more high. So that's why they would be testing for the actual drug. Again, not the metabolite. Very, very specifically the actual drug, and then the part of the cannabinoid that has the more psychoactive effect, that more likely to impair, right, your cerebrum in terms of your driving ability. Where I said people, they do make the same number of mistakes when they use marijuana. When they drive, they just make different mistakes than the alcohol people make.
Quick question, Professor.
Sure.
So basically, drug testing is for like to see like the long-term effect or how it's been affecting you over time, whereas opposed to the like how the cops test, it's more for like what's going on at this moment.
Yeah. So like if I'm doing, like, most drug tests are usually for employment. So when you're doing that kind of a drug test, I do kind of want to know what have you been doing across time, because maybe you're going to be like a airplane mechanic, and I don't want you to be like impaired that day and not put the part back in the right place, and then the plane crashes, right? You know, so I would be doing my employment physical, and part of that I'd be doing a drug test. And yeah, I do want to look back across time a little bit. I want to know what you've done the last few days, not just the day that you cleaned up for the interview. Whereas the police, they have a different goal with their drug testing. They're actually not looking to see, that'd be like a different crime, a different, you know, like the traffic stop officer. They're not concerned with some other crime like, are you a drug user? That's actually not their goal at that moment. Their goal is, are you an impaired drug user? Like, are you drunk or stoned too much to be driving, right, at a sobriety checkpoint? And yeah, and those, we want to know, did you take it, like, do you have drug in you now? Are you impaired now? Right? We don't want to know that you did it 3 weeks ago. But as an employer, I might want to know you got high 3 weeks ago. Depending on what I'm employing you for. Maybe you're going to be a pilot. Kind of want to know, right? But maybe you're not. Maybe it's something that shouldn't matter. All right. So that's a different class, talking about the ethics and morals and legalities of drug testing. That's a whole nother class. We're going to focus in on the drugs. All right, so just get this idea that we do have drug testing. Most of the time, we're going to test for the presence of the metabolites. However, there are exceptions to that where we might be testing for the actual presence of the drug, like, for example, a police trying to see if you're impaired in that moment. And that's why they also wouldn't just test the drug level of the drug. They would also have you walk a line and answer questions and see that you're actually impaired. Now, when it comes to drug testing, this is something more I want to say. So you can either test for the metabolite, or you can test for the presence of the drug. And again, it depends on the application, which test you would choose, what you're trying to do, why you need to take the drug test or administer a drug test. Here's the other thing about a drug test. They don't test whether you took the drug or don't take the drug. And let me explain a little bit, because to an extent they do, but to an extent they don't. Because, for example, they have what's called a cutoff score. The cutoff score is the amount of drug that would be in the sample that then you say the sample is positive for the drug. that indicates that you took the drug. We say it's positive for the drug. That indicates you took the drug. And then we'd say that that drug test is, it tests positive. We're testing for a drug, then the test says you took the drug, and now we say the test is positive. Like positive, right? So now, there's this thing called a cutoff score. When we design the test, they decide what that cutoff score is. So say you have a sample. I have 2 containers here. And they're identical, and I fill them with a urine sample. And then let's say they both have drug in them. So we go and we look at the drug, and there's presence of drug. So like here's drug, these little dots, like that's the drug. And here's the drug. First, is there a difference, the amount of drug in the sample A versus sample B? Do they have the same amount of drug?
Did you say like the dots are the drug? I'm sorry.
Yeah, do they have the same amount of drug? Is there the same, do they have the same concentration of drug, these 2 samples? Okay.
No.
Right? Which one has more drug?
A.
Yeah, A's got more drug. This isn't like some, optical illusion or something. So here's the thing. They have to determine a cutoff score. They usually do it like parts per million. What they call parts per million. And so they say if you've got like 1 million drops of urine, so if you like took this urine drop and you started dropping 1, 2, 3, 4, you dropped 1 million drops of urine, how many of those drops would have had drug in them? Right, so obviously if we took a sample from A and we took a urine sample and we're dropping, there'd be a lot more parts of drug in those drops of urine, right? There'd be a lot more chances there being drug in there. In sample B, there's a lot less chances of drug being in there. We would say part B has fewer parts per million, but there's still drug. Right? It's got fewer parts per million. Drug A has more parts per million. Okay, and what will happen is the drug doesn't, the drug test, they don't test for 0. So let's make a 0. This is like our 0. We take this sample and we look inside. We'll get rid of that little P in there. That's funny. Get rid of the P. Get rid of the P and the P. That was an accidental funny. Okay. Get rid of the P and the P. Anyway, the drug in there. Let's say this urine sample C. This urine sample C has 0 drug in there. So you would say, oh, this person should test negative, right? And most of you probably think person B, they should test positive, and person A should also test positive because A and B both have drugs. But that's not how it works. The drug test is established that you set a particular cutoff. And usually the cutoff isn't at 0, the cutoff's above 0. So let's say we put the cutoff here. I'm trying to do that with a line. Hold on. So if the cutoff was between A and B, we'd say everybody, even if they had a few parts of drug in their system, say sample B, this person goes and takes a drug test. They took the drug. There's drug in their system, but they're below the cutoff, right? So this person would come back as negative. You did not take the drug. And they go, because they really took it. I don't know how it came back negative. There wasn't enough drug for the test to say, oh, we cut the score to say you had to have above, maybe when there was 4, if there was a 4th in there, you're positive for the drug. But we made the cutoff has to be, you have to establish a score. We're above that score or below that score, and it's never at 0. So obviously the person at 0 would have a negative test, right? But the person above that, anybody above it, right? Any of these people, they're going to have positive tests, especially this person. Person A has a lot of drug in their system. They would have a positive test. So person B, they took the drug test and the drug test comes back negative and they get the job. But they actually did the drug. Their employer doesn't know because it comes back negative. We have a word for describing that person, the results of their test. It was called a false negative. They did the drug. They did the drug. I can see the drug. There's drug, there's drug, there's drug. They have freaking drug in their body, but the test, they're below the cutoff. So the test says back, you're negative. Occasionally, you might have somebody who didn't do the drug at all, and they still they take the test and it comes back and it says they did the drug, and they say, dude, I swear I didn't do the drug. And I said, well, this test doesn't make very many mistakes. We don't have very many false positives. Here's the thing, when it comes to drug tests, the more sensitive you make the test, the more you put the cutoff, as you lower the cutoff, as it getting to lower and lower and lower parts per million are saying, oh, you're positive. As you lower that cutoff score, what you're doing is you're making that test more and more and more sensitive. It's saying, if there's just 1 part per million in there, make that a positive test. That's more sensitive than the one that said you had to have 5 parts per million, like above B, right, to have it. As we go lower and lower and lower, we're making it more and more and more sensitive. There's a problem, and this has to do with math. It has to do with logic. It's just a law of nature. But the more sensitive you make a test, the more sensitive you make the test, the more likely you're going to have what they call the false positive. The person who didn't take the drug, but the test says, oops, you did. Because when the test gets so sensitive like that, other molecules that might be similar but aren't the same might react with the test and say, oh, you're test positive. For example, this happened to a friend of mine. They hadn't taken the drug. They were going for a pre-employment physical. They called me, I teach the drug class. They said, what should I do? And I said, well, you should, no matter what, even if you don't take drugs, you should still go to Walmart and get like the little, for like $10, it tests like 15 different drugs, and just make sure that you don't have anything in your system. Because he had taken a cold medication the week before. Cold medication can make you test positive for amphetamines. So just make sure you don't have anything in your system before you go do it. And they said, well, should I just get the amphetamine one? I said, no, just be careful. Get the one that tests for everything. They go, I don't do any drugs. Just get the one that tests for everything. So I get the call back. It says I tested positive for marijuana. You use marijuana? No. Well, I said, well, you're having a false positive. What does that mean? Well, it means that the test is saying that you took the drug when you didn't. And what's going on is usually another molecule, some other molecule that it's picking up because it's so sensitive. It's hearing like, almost like it's hearing voices that aren't there, right? The test. So it picks up another molecule. We figured out, we never actually figured out the other molecule, but there are other molecules, for example, that can make you test positive for a marijuana screen. For example, there's some molecules in hot peppers, and this person ate a lot of barbecue and a lot of hot peppers every day. A lot of barbecue sauce, all that kind of stuff. They stopped eating the barbecue sauce. They stopped eating all the hot peppers. They changed their soap because they had soap that was made, some of the Dr. Bronner's soap is made with hemp, and hemp is related to cannabis. So they stopped using that soap, and but every day at noon, they would test positive. They would do a morning sample, it was clean. They'd do an afternoon sample, it was clean. Every day at noon, they were testing positive. They couldn't figure out what it was. So in the end, we never did figure out what the molecule was. They were eating just steamed chicken and steamed vegetables before, like the week before their test, because they were just trying to figure out what was causing this false positive. The job was really important to them. They didn't want to. So in the end, we just figured out that every morning they were clean. So they just scheduled their drug test in the morning. We never did figure out what was causing the false positive, right? So, but I would highly recommend, if you're ever going to be taking a drug test, you can test yourself ahead of time. Maybe you have done drug and you stopped a month ago smoking weed because you knew you were going to be getting a job interview, but you still want to make sure that you're clean, because if you're not going to get considered for the job. You're just going to go, they just won't call you back. And you want to be considered for the job. So you're sick, wait, delay. If you miss the job, they'll hire again at that company. If your thing goes into the drug bin, you're never going to get hired at that company again. You're like in that reject file forever, right? So drug test, the more sensitive it gets, the lower where it picks up every single drug user. They'll catch every single drug user, but they're also going to kick out some of these false positive people that didn't do the drug at all. And we don't want, if it's a pre-employment physical, I don't actually want to exclude people that haven't done the drug that might get picked up by one of these false positives. So that's why they don't set it to 0 ever. That's why there always is some cut score. And in the United States, in the 1980s, the cutoff score for marijuana on most pre-employment physicals was double what it is now. So that the test used to be a lot less sensitive. So there were a lot fewer false positives. But they actually lowered it by half. So now when you take a marijuana screen, you're more likely to, even if you've not used for a few weeks, if you were tested in the 80s, it would say, oh, you're clean. Even if you had some drug in your system. Now it'll say you're positive. And it might be more likely to pick up a false positive from some other thing that's in your body. So it's important just to test yourself.
I'm sorry, I just want to clear up. So you're saying that the more sensitive the test is, it's more you have more likelihood of getting a false positive?
Correct. It'll pick up things that aren't really there. So this relates to the COVID virus. So people keep saying, a lot of tests are picking up a lot of false positives. Why? They took the test and then it turns out I didn't have the virus. Like, what's going on with that? Like, why is that? So here's the thing. This is a deadly virus. If it kills 2% of the population, we would have like 600 million dead Americans in a year. Don't make someone think that it's 2% is a low number, because we have 340 million Americans. So 2% of 340 million is actually a lot of Americans dead. It's a lot. It's like something like 600. It's a lot. So that's why we want to tackle this virus. Yeah, most of us will be okay, but we don't want that 2% to be dead. Our economy could never survive like hundreds of thousands, 300, 600,000 dead people, 1 million dead people. We can't afford that in our economy. So we make the tests that they have to decide if someone really has the virus. If we cut the sensitivity on the test too high, someone's going to have that virus. We're going to have another problem, what we call a false negative. When you set the cutoff too high, the higher you set the cutoff, when you go the other way. So instead of moving the cutoff down, when you move the cutoff down, it gets more and more sensitive. You get more and more false positives. When you set it and you go it the other way and you move the cutoff up, you're going to end up with more what we call false negatives, meaning somebody that actually did the drug, but the test says they didn't. Or someone that has the virus in them, but the test says they're not. So when we're having a worldwide pandemic, there's no perfect test. The test will either produce false negatives or it'll produce false positives. It's never a perfect test.
Wow.
So we have a pandemic. Which way do you want to set it? Do you want it to let people that have the virus mistakenly think that they don't have the virus and they're good to walk around? Or do we want to have to retest people because maybe we pick up a false positive and then we have to retest it a second time to make sure that they really are positive? So when it comes to the pandemic, we don't want sick people walking around, so we'd rather pick up. So the COVID virus is a coronavirus. So the other colds are also caused by coronaviruses. So if I had a cold in the last month, I would have little pieces of some other coronavirus in my body right now. If the test is set very sensitive, which they are, on occasion, it might tell me I tested positive for COVID when in fact it might be a different virus, a different coronavirus. But that's okay, they can do it a second time. Once you do it 2 or 3 times, the chances of the false positive or negative begin to get diminished. You take the average of the tests. Also, there's more specific tests that we can take, what they call like actual antibody tests instead of the antigen tests. So there's other tests we can give a person to make sure that they really are positive or negative, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a drug test. What if I'm talking about depression screening? Right, you know, like right now, everybody's we're all home and we're all isolated and we're all getting depression. So we should all get screened for depression. Every test has false positives and false negatives. So the same thing with a depression screen. You're going to be hearing a lot more people being diagnosed with depression right now because they're going to set the cutoff on the screen a little lower. Because maybe it's going to say I have depression and I'm going to get to a counselor and the counselor is going to meet with me and say, you know what, you're kind of close, but you need to just make a few changes. I don't think you need medicine right now. You know, maybe you need a support group. But if I really have depression and the test says, no, you don't, false negative, I'm going to be out there with depression. Maybe I'll be suicidal. Maybe I'll be homicidal, right? So you'll be seeing that. And that's because it's not because the test's not reliable. It's because we know there's no perfect test. So we either set it one way to get more false negatives. We set it the other way to get more false positives. So, you know, what do you want? The justice system, when it comes to our laws on murder, our justice system, well, not just murder even, just innocent until proven guilty. When you set it up that way, that's basically setting up a test to determine whether someone's innocent or guilty. No test is perfect. In the justice system, you will have someone that gets charged with a crime. They really did the crime. But then it goes through the justice system and it'll say, nope, you didn't do the crime, you get off, right? False negative. We could also have false positives where the person's accused of the crime and you go through the justice system and the justice system says, yeah, you did the crime, but they didn't do the crime. So you have a justice system. You can't make a perfect test. Do you want to have more false negatives or more false positives? In the justice system in America, we've decided we want to fall more towards false negative. We don't want to put innocent people behind bars. So we've sort of rigged the test of the way our system is made to let innocent people go on occasion. Because that would be better than letting guilty people go on occasion. Because that would be better than putting innocent behind bars for life. And when it comes to the death penalties and things like that, that's why we have beyond a reasonable doubt. Like if you have any doubt, you're supposed to let them go. Because we want to make sure that we're hopefully not putting people in jail that don't belong there. And you guys know, the system is also not perfect. So a lot of you administration of justice, this course like ties to a lot of things that you might be doing in administration of justice. You don't want to make that mistake. You don't want the test to be too sensitive and put innocent people behind bars. Okay. So that's drug testing sort of in its 10,000-foot view, that we can test for drugs, either the metabolite or the drug itself, that no test is perfect. They'll either generate false positives. They didn't take the drug, but this drug test says they did, or it'll generate false negatives. They did the drug and the test said they didn't. And where we put the cutoff score, like where we put that cutoff, the higher up it goes, the less sensitive it is, the more false negatives it is, the more sensitive it is, the more false positives there are. And so we set that depending on the type of test it is and what our outcomes. Like drug test. If it's my pilot, I still want a sensitive test. Let them do a second test to determine if my pilot's high or not. But I don't want a pilot that's really on the drug saying that he didn't get high that morning before they started flying my plane, right? So that's a drug test. And again, how it's tied to this topic, because the drug test, most drug tests right, is actually going to test for the presence of the metabolite, right? So that breaking down process, that's where it's going to be. Now, the fact that we can test your urine, for example, when we do a drug test, that has to do with this elimination process. And that's the last piece that I wanted to talk about before we get to, say, stimulants, probably. Your body will eliminate, get rid of this molecule every way possible. It'll break it down enzymatically, right? So it'll metabolize it. And if it's been converted into some other molecule, it's gone. But even those metabolites and even those drugs need to be gotten rid of. So your body will get rid of it everywhere it can. Typically, obviously, your kidneys will be sending it out into your urine and eliminating it that way. And that's why a lot of drug tests, you can just do a simple urine test and the presence of all the metabolites and all the drugs will show up in your urine. But it's not just in your urine, it'll be in every body fluid. So it'll show up in your sweat. It'll show up in your tears. If you're lactating, it would show up in your breast milk. Right, other body fluids. Semen, trying to think, tears we got, breath. There's water vapor in your breath, so technically there's a fluid in there. The molecules will be, your body will tell the sweat glands, take this molecule from the bloodstream, put it into the sweat, and now release it out of the body. You know, it'll say, take the tear cells, it'll say, take this molecule from the blood, put it into the tears, and now send it out in tears. It'll leave the lungs. By every time you exhale, it'll cross the membranes and it'll leave your body as you're exhaling.
Professor.
Yes.
And also in hair.
Hair. Oh, yeah. That's a good
I've
one.
seen people get drug tested through a hair test.
Hair and nails.
Yep.
Oh, one we don't like to think about, but feces.
Cool.
I don't think if feces were the only way to do drug tests, I think human beings would have been like, drugs aren't too bad. Maybe we'll let people do drugs if everybody had to get feces samples.
People be taking Pepto-Bismol.
Oh, I met another body fluid in the breath, saliva. Right, so a lot of times a saliva test, that's the most typical way they do it today. They won't usually do a urine sample. You just go to the job. Nobody wants to collect your urine. Like, I'm Bonds and I want to hire you to like be a cashier. I don't want to freaking test your urine. I'm not a doctor or a nurse. That's gross. But if I give you like a Q-tip and I say, with like a sponge on it, I say, put it in your mouth. You hold it in your mouth for a few minutes. You cannot stop yourself from making saliva. So the saliva is going to go onto that sponge. And then they'll put that, and now there'll be drug in that saliva or metabolites in that saliva. They can put it in. They don't even have to send it to a lab. They can do it right there. They don't have to check for temperature. You can't bring in fake pee or something like that. You can't borrow someone else's saliva.
Professor, for the last few jobs when I had to do like a urine sample, they would send me to like, I guess like a third party place, like at LabCorp or something.
Correct. Because they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
They're like, there's so much legality too. And if you do it at like LabCorp, you know, they only schedule so many people an hour so they can kind of monitor everybody. And, you know, they send you into the bathroom. And if it's like, depending on the level of the job, like if it's something for the Department of Transportation, they'll send somebody into the bathroom with you. They have to watch you go. If it's just like Bonds, they'll be like, you know, go to the bathroom on your own. But then they still have to do things like they have to check the temperature of the pee so that if you smuggled in pee, it would have lost body temperature. They have to make sure that it hasn't been adulterated with other molecules. They have to check the density of it to make sure you haven't added water. Why would they want to check to make sure you haven't added water? I just flipped to this slide.
Because it would dilute it. So
It would dilute it, right? It's checking for so many parts per million. If I add a little water, now there's fewer parts per million of drug. I could take a positive test and turn it into a negative test by diluting it. So they don't let you dilute it. They measure the specific gravity of your urine. If it doesn't have enough solids, solutes dissolved in the solvent, they just automatically say you cheated on the drug test, you test positive. So that's why they'll tend to go to a third party. And that's why saliva tests have become so popular. I didn't mean to do that, I'm going to pick up a square. That's why saliva tests have become so popular, because that's actually, an employer could consider doing that. Here's a question people ask me often about drug tests while we're here. So if marijuana were to get legalized at the federal level, would that mean that an employer can't prohibit me from working for them if I'm using the drug?
No.
employers can decide
Yeah,
if
exactly.
whether they want to, at least in the private sector. I don't know about public sector, but I know private sector they.
Absolutely, in the private sector, they cannot. They can absolutely say, we don't want you. So for example, this has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. So nicotine, which is the active ingredient in tobacco.
Oh,
Okay. So if I'm a private employer,
you know,
I can prohibit you from being a nicotine user, even in your private time. Right? So if I test you for nicotine and you have metabolites, so you didn't smoke at work, you don't smoke at all at work, but you use a patch or at home you smoke or something like that. If I say I have a no smoking policy, if to be my employee, you cannot use nicotine, even though it's perfectly legal, you're over the 18 and like everything, they are not allowed. They are allowed to discriminate. They can fire you for using nicotine. So if they can absolutely not hire you or fire you for using nicotine, which doesn't even impair you mentally, they absolutely cannot hire you or fire you for using any other drug that might be legal, including marijuana, especially if you work for the Department of Transportation. That's a public one. You're talking about public versus private. They're public, but you can't operate a semi-tractor trailer while drunk. It's not okay. You're a pilot. You're not allowed to fly the plane while high, right? So even if it's alcohol's legal, you still can't fly the plane drunk, So there's limits, and they can absolutely discriminate against marijuana if marijuana were to ever become legal. So they could still say, you want to work as a nurse in our hospital, even on your own time, even if you're not high on your own time, so what? So be it. You can't work for us. Go find a hospital that will let you be a stoner. We don't want to work for us.
It's like at Home Depot. Like if you create like an accident or if you drop some product,
automatic drug test, right?
Whether you're under the influence or not, they have to drug test you depending on how grave the situation is.
I worked for lens crafters back in the 1980s, manufacturing the lens itself and putting them into the frames. And so we use a lot of equipment, and they had the same policy. So it didn't matter the smallest of accidents. If it got reported, something that's an accident that needs to be reported. So I guess you nick your finger and win, but anything that needs to be reported, automatic drug test. So even if you pass the initial employee drug test, now you get an accident later, they're going to drug test you. If you test positive, you're fired, and they also don't have to pay for a lot of your expenses and things like that as a result of your accident. And if you injure another employee, they can hold you to have to pay the damages to that employee because you came to work.
Yeah, when I barely first started working there, actually there was someone who worked in the front loading zone, like in the lot, and he had hit the roll-up door and actually broke it, damaged the roll-up door. And this is the second week I started working there. I saw it happen, and I barely got to know the guy. Who was super cool, and the next thing you know, he's not there. And they told me that when he went to do the drug test, he denied the test because he knew he was gonna like fail it. So once you deny it, you automatically get fired.
And I'll tell you what, all of you guys, I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. But if he was going to fail the test, he's better off just quitting his job. You don't want it to go down on your permanent record somewhere, you know? Don't know where that'll come back later to roost. You know, so he did the right thing. He's going to test positive. He can quit on the spot, right? You know, better than having it go down on his record, you know, that he
exactly.
knows what drug he was using too, you know? So yeah, these things are real, and drug tests are real. And again, you can always, if you're pre-employment, you can test yourself. Make sure that you're negative before you go in for that test.
Professor, it's crazy though, because even like how you're saying, like with the metabolites and stuff, so somebody can be like a pretty heavy drug user, but then like on harder drugs versus like marijuana, different scheduled ones, and then
totally unfair. What your classmate's saying is some hard drugs like heroin and cocaine, methamphetamine, they have really short half-lives, and their metabolites have short half-lives. So like 48 hours or 72 hours after like taking Vicodin or cocaine, I'll test clean. No matter what. But like 6 weeks after using marijuana, where I'm completely not impaired, I could still potentially test positive for that metabolite. That is very unfair because one drug is more impairing than the other drug, right? But then it doesn't matter, you won't get the job. I was thinking with the Home Depot, one reason why so many U.S. Olympic athletes work for Home Depot is because they have a really strict drug policy. But if you're an Olympic athlete, you're constantly being drug tested anyways, so you don't do any drugs anyways. So like it's actually really easy for you to get employed at Home Depot and know that you're never going to risk getting kicked out. And then if you make it to the Olympics, they'll give you the time to go to the Olympics. You know, they'll work around your training schedule. So they sponsor a lot of athletes because of that.
Professor.
Yeah, Matt.
Why do you think it is that marijuana, or THC, lasts so long? Is that because it's natural?
It's because it's so lipophilic.
And it's also, I mean, the other, like the
it's
other.
It's not because it's natural. We can make a molecule that's unnatural that can do the same thing. It's because it's so lipophilic that as soon as your kidneys put it into the urine, it seeps right back through all the cell membranes back into your blood.
Oh, especially
your kidneys are actually able to eliminate like 99% of it in just a few hours.
Oh, really?
But the problem is it keeps leaking back. It leaks out of your bladder. It leaks out of the tubes. It leaks out. It is not leaking. It's diffusing back through the membranes and going. Now it's concentrated in the urine because the kidneys concentrated it. So you have a gradient. So it diffuses back out into your blood. So then the kidneys take it and they reconcentrate it back in the urine. And then it diffuses back out into the blood because of the gradient and because it's so lipophilic.
So it's like just on a conveyor belt. Exactly.
And so it takes 6 weeks. So the very little of what gets put into your urine actually makes it to the toilet. So it takes a month, you know, for it to just keep putting in it, most of it, little bit to the toilet, and eventually it's all eliminated.
And what's that other? It's marijuana, but I don't know it's for pain or something like that, but it doesn't have the one certain.
So with marijuana, there's different types of cannabinoids.
Yeah, that's it.
So let me say something about that. I do have I don't know how deeply, I don't think I got too far into everything in those videos. I'm going to be watching them before I make the final, so I make sure that I don't go too deep into anything. They were made in somewhat of a hurry under the remote learning.
You don't have to explain that to us.
Cannabinoids are the molecule that's found inside the cannabis plant. If we grow the cannabis plant for its medical molecules, for its medicinal molecules, we call that plant marijuana. It's the same plant though. If we grow it, the plant can either produce a lot of chemicals or it can produce a lot of cytoskeleton and a lot of fibers and a lot of cellulose. So if we grow it for the chemicals, that plant is known as marijuana. If we grow it for the fibers, I just did the British spelling for that. If we do it for the fiber,
Oh,
the British spelled the other way. If we do it for the fiber, right, because we want to make paper or cloth, right, you know, because you can use cannabis. You guys know, like the U.S. Constitution is written on cannabis paper. Okay,
you can smoke.
so then we call these plants. We don't call them marijuana plants. We call these hemp plants. And within the medicinal molecules, there's a whole host of different types of molecules we can get these medicinal things to make. In general, we call them all cannabinoids.
It's a cool name.
But there's different types of them, like for example, THC, CBD,
Yeah, CBD.
CBN, right? There's all these different cannas like within it. Some of them, like the CBDs, those can sometimes be, the hemp can make those. But basically, that's what they're being, you would maybe test for the different molecules. With most drug tests, though, they're really only looking to see if someone's using it in a recreational, non-medical way. So that would be the THC, is usually what most drug tests are going after, the THC. And then when the THC breaks down, right, the metabolites of the THC are what the drug tests are going after. It's so unfair that they do the National City Police, they have the marijuana saliva test. It'll test for the actual THC molecule. So it'll tell if you've smoked anywhere immediately up to about 5 hours, where it's actually testing the THC. So if you smoked at a party and then an hour later you drive through National City, if you're a chronic user of marijuana, you're probably no longer impaired by it, but you'll still have active THC in your system. And if you get popped at a sobriety checkpoint and they give you one of those saliva tests, you're going to test positive for THC and you're going to have a DUI. And I'm also not a lawyer and I'm not giving legal advice. But if you ever get the DUI for THC, absolutely get a lawyer, absolutely fight it, because there's no established levels of impairment for the THC levels. So once you get a lawyer, you're able to fight it. And if nobody fights it, then the cops will keep doing it. And it's sort of a waste of time. But they do want to find the people that are really, really impaired. So, and there are people that are very, very impaired. Some of you are going to be doing administration of justice. And when you first get onto a police force, often the duty that you're most likely to get hired into, especially for sheriff, is traffic. And with traffic, police officer, you're gonna be involved with a lot of sobriety checkpoints, and you will find the people that are very impaired. And that's not just the drug. They're gonna test positive for saliva, but then as the police officer, you want to do the whole thing. You're gonna do the full physical, right? Have them walk the line, have them do the thing, have them counting backwards. That'll show that they are impaired, that the test matches their impairment. If they just test positive for THC, but they show no impairment, you don't want to arrest that person because you're going to go to court and look like a fool, right? But you do want to get those people that are really impaired and need to be off the street, right? So, but keep that in mind. If you're a user and you go through National City, you're going to get, they have a lot of these, they use them a lot. Once the police force buys them, they have to justify their use. If they don't get used, then they're not going to be in the budget for the following year. So they've got to use them, and they bought millions of them. So they're using them. They bought millions of kits about 2 years ago. I don't know if they're going to buy them again. They haven't been very successful at catching people. Right. I muted someone who's got feedback. Okay. So this kind of gets us through the idea, right, that drugs are going to be, let me say, for your urine, that's like your kidney is mostly going to be involved there. So your organs of your kidney are going to be very involved, right? A lot of metabolism doesn't just take place in the blood. It really takes place in the liver. So one thing I wanted to say is the organ that's eliminating the drugs sometimes can become diseased by that drug. And in the alcohol videos that you guys will be watching independently, I talk about liver disease like cirrhosis of the liver, injury of the liver caused by, say, for example, alcohol. And that's because the alcohol, every time it's passing through the liver, as the liver is trying to break it down, as the liver is trying to metabolize it, it's also being saturated with it. So those cells are also succumbing to the deadly toxin of the alcohol itself. So these organs, like livers and kidneys that are doing a lot of this elimination, they can also get ill and become diseased when someone is using a lot of a drug. Or maybe they're not even doing a lot of a drug, but maybe they've gone and done something really extreme with themselves. Like they went on an extreme diet, like not just a little bit of a ketone diet, but a real extreme ketone diet. They can destroy their kidneys because the kidneys have to eliminate those ketones, right? And things like that. So that's why your liver and your kidney people get liver disease, people get kidney disease, right? Because it's doing a big job, including eliminating drugs. Oh, when someone overdoses, for example, on Tylenol has a really great LD50. That's why it's over the counter. But if I take enough of it, the way I die from a Tylenol overdose, it doesn't go into my brain and then stop me from breathing or something. What it does is the Tylenol goes to my liver, and while my liver is trying to detoxify it and trying to break it down, it saturates my liver and I go into liver failure. And then I die, right?
Oh, wow.
So it's like these organs can sometimes suffer the biggest side effects. That would be a side effect, I guess, liver failure, like a biggest side effect from some of these drugs because they're in the process of breaking them down and they're being exposed to them in a bigger way. Gosh, I hope that I've covered what I need to. Let me look quickly.
Professor, can
Yes.
you suffer from liver failure just for taking like regular doses of anything?
Not usually, no. And that's why, like when you take a Tylenol bottle where they say, oh, take up to 2 tablets, 4 to 6 hours a day, don't take more than whatever, it might say, don't take more than 20 tablets in 24 hours or 10, they give you those ranges on the bottle, over the counter bottle. That's because they want to stay it's really hard to overdose, but they also want to stay at a dosage where you don't risk like liver failure, for example. But if somebody went and took a whole bottle of Tylenol because they were trying to overdose, they could end up in that problem. So for example,
obviously makes
but
me
if I just
uncomfortable, right?
if they said, oh, only take 12 pills in 24 hours and I accidentally couldn't remember and I took a couple extra doses and I took 18, I'm not going to have liver failure. Because that would mean it had a bad LD50, right? So we want something that even if you screw up and you take an extra dose or two, you don't die. Those are the drugs that are over the counter. Now, I wanted to look real quickly at the primer for 16 because that's where I've been dabbling along. Yeah, muting. There it is. The nervous system is because I closed it in my view. Primary chapter 16. And again, I'm kind of glossing over 15 at this point, only as the receptors, as the neurotransmitters get emphasized as we do each drug. Modes of delivery, routes of administration. Yeah, we've done that. Oral, liver, all that. Rectal, buccal, injection, parenteral absorption, distribution.
Professor.
Yes.
Hey, what chapter did you say that for last test, but in this test, it's going to be on? Was it 15 or which one was it?
16.
16? Okay.
Yeah,
So
which is the same as the same as the Orange Book chapter 2.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have the orange book.
Right, but I do have the Orange Book up, like it's in Canvas here for you if you don't want to read it. So this was the last little thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to absorption and distribution and elimination, right? Metabolism and elimination. There are differences, individual differences. We're not all the same, right? We can be affected by age. That's why, for example, we don't give the same dose of a drug to a baby that we might give to a 50-year-old, or a 16-year-old, right? Why like the baby Tylenol, it'll have it's by weight, right? Because there's another thing. Weight can affect the very small, like children that don't weigh a lot, or the very big, maybe I'm morbidly obese and I got an extra couple 100 pounds. The very big and the very small will absorb drugs at a different rate, right? Will process them at a different rate. A very, very large person can take a larger dose of a drug than a smaller person. And children, of course, being the smallest, and that's why we tend to administer their drug by body weight. And you get the Tylenol bottle, you're like, I don't know how much my kid weighs. I just got to give them the thing. You got to get them on a scale and figure out they weigh 35 pounds. And you need, however many drops of Tylenol, baby Tylenol, right? Their nutritional status. If you are malnourished, you cannot distribute drugs the same way. And that's because I was saying in your blood, we have molecules that help escort and help move drugs through our body, right? Ones that are maybe not hydrophilic. And those molecules are made in your liver. You have to eat the food, send the raw ingredients to your liver, then your liver can make these blood molecules. If you're malnourished, your liver doesn't have the raw ingredients. It can't make these blood molecules. Now you can't transport the drug around your system, right? Maybe you can't make the enzyme needed to break it down, right? If you have a nutritional problem, it will affect how drugs work in you. I had patients when they used to have really bad infections. The first thing I'd put them on an oral drug, take a sample, try to figure out if I could switch them to a more sensitive drug that would be more specific to their illness. And I'd call them up the next day, and sometimes it's spreading, and we would get the results back, and the infection, it should have been susceptible to the drug I had them on. Whenever that happened, it didn't matter what my patient, what they looked like. I would say, you need to go to the hospital. I need to get some blood work on you. Okay, doctor. And I would get blood work. And what I wanted to look in their blood work was their nutritional status. There's things in your blood that can tell you how well nourished somebody is. You can have somebody that looks perfectly normal weighted, even maybe a little overweight, but they don't eat the right foods. They are malnourished. And it'll affect their ability of the drug to work in their body. So I would have patients like that. I discovered some underlying alcoholics this way, actually. But I'd have patients like that. I'd get them, and I'd find out that they were very malnourished. And I would have to actually prescribe them to take like those ensures for a few days to bump up their nutrition. And then once their liver has the molecules, it starts putting in the blood. Now the antibiotic can be transported around their blood and can get to the site of where it's needed. But without those molecules in their blood, I could pour it through an IV into their bloodstream, but without those molecules to help escort it, it won't get to where it needs to go, right? So your nutritional status absolutely affects your ability to process and utilize drugs. Gender. And so male and females, we process some drugs differently. Men have livers bigger than us. Men have twice as much enzyme in their stomach, for example, for breaking down alcohol. I talk about this in the video. So men can drink alcohol at twice the rate as a female and get drunk at the same rate. A woman has to drink half as much alcohol as a man because she has half as much enzymes in her stomach for breaking it down. Men can drink twice as much alcohol and not get as drunk because they have twice as much enzyme for breaking it down. That's just a small example. Actually, I was going to say that a flip gender. Women have more enzymes for breaking down marijuana than men. So some of you maybe have known like chronic marijuana users, men and women. And usually when that happens, like the women that get to be real chronic users, they can rip like bong load after bong load and they're like not high. But the guys will be high, they got to stop. They're like, dude, my girlfriend smokes me out. That's because the girl, it's the flip of alcohol. The guy can chug the alcohol, girls under the table, right? Flip, the girl can smoke, if she's habituated, can smoke a lot more marijuana than the guy, right? So there are gender differences. I have to say something about this though. Drug tests are only done on men. So clinical trials of a drug test are usually only done on men. And that's because women can get pregnant and we don't want to take an experimental drug and try it on a woman and then find out she's pregnant. Even if she's using birth control, she can get pregnant. Even if she doesn't have sex, she could get pregnant because something could happen, like a rape or something. So we don't usually test drugs on women, and then only after they get to the marketplace do we find out if they have a problem. Now, some of you might be signing up for the drug trials for the COVID vaccines. They're getting like 120,000 Americans for those. Some of those trials will be paid trials, and I don't know if they're including women in those trials. The very, very first trials, they'll only will include postmenopausal women because they can't get pregnant. They'll do nuns. Nuns volunteer because the nuns, unless someone rapes them, they can't get pregnant because they're nuns. And nuns volunteer a lot for these. And the same thing with priests volunteer a lot because they don't father children because they're celibate. So I don't know if any of you guys are going to be volunteering for any of those studies, but I think they've already got almost everybody they need for the first round in the U.S. I think it's around, I think they've already, last I looked, they already had about 90,000 people screened and signed up and ready to go into the drug trial. But you can get paid quite a amount of money in med school. I had a friend that made, for a flu vaccine, he got paid $1,000 for the first shot, then he got $5,000 for the second shot. And I think he got like $15,000 for the third time because he stayed in the study, paid for a whole year's medical tuition. I'm not saying to participate in a drug study, but I'm just saying they're out there. Some of you are more than happy to I take my flu shot all the time. I'm not afraid of vaccines, so they don't want me though. I'm a female and I'm not postmenopausal yet. I've got underlying medical issues. I'll be rejected from the study. So, but some of you might qualify.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure. Yeah.
I know a few people who have done like what they say, like a little trick or something to when they're about to do a drug test, where that way they can come out clean.
Yeah. So it's interestingly enough, when I first started teaching this drug class, I went in California. It was before the prop that made it so we could have dispensaries and everything, but they still had people selling out of like not weed or anything, no dispensaries, but you still had the smoke shops that had like the glassware and everything. And I was going in there as I was like doing research on my class, and I was asking them questions, and I said, hey, if I want to take a drug test, what products do you have here? And everybody, and even online, everybody kept saying the extra clean product would totally help you to pass the drug test. So I read up about it, and what it does is it does cause you to pee a lot. So it does cause you to eliminate a lot of THC, and it does put other molecules into your urine. So your specific gravity can sometimes be okay. But I actually did a study of my own. I took 20 volunteers that were marijuana users and chronic marijuana users, and we did a test to see if I bought all the extra clean, and we actually did a test using all commercially available products. And they followed it to the they say you're supposed to stop 3 days beforehand and then eat these and avoid these foods and then take this and then take the next sample and then eat these pills and like do everything. And all 30 people did that, and all 30 people tested positive.
Well, I know, well, the other people who have done it a different way.
Which way?
I think it's something like creatine or something like that they buy at the, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same effect. I haven't, there's creatine in most of those products. So what I would recommend someone to do is, obviously you stop. If you know you're gonna take a drug test, if you can, stop. And then if you're gonna use any of these products, go ahead, use them, but go to Walmart, spend the $10 on the kit, and then test your own urine. If you test positive, don't go to the center to get tested, because you're gonna test positive there. Their test is even more sensitive. So yeah, so at least test yourself. Don't go, oh, I took the thing and my friend said take the creatinine, I'll definitely be clean. A lot depends on if it's a male or a female. A lot depends on their body weight. If you have a little bit more body weight, those things will work less for you. If you're thinner, it'll work better for you to fake the test, so to speak, to get a false, you're trying to get that false positive. I mean, false negative.
False positive.
Yeah, not the false positive, but the false negative. And so you got to take that into consideration too. Like a lean man does that, and they came out clean, and then their girlfriend who by nature women have like 10% more body fat might do exactly the same thing and then test positive, because we have, again, there's gender differences. There's age differences and weight differences.
But would that kind of like take longer, I guess, for the body to get rid of the THC, or is it the same period of time, per se?
Yeah, your body still takes the same half-life. I don't think it changed the half-life, but it makes the output of the urine look a little different so you can pass the test.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So you can get that false negative.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Shapiro, also you said that you tested chronic users, like
Yeah, because I had to get subjects that were already using marijuana, so I wasn't gonna like provide marijuana to somebody. So everybody that was in my study were people that were using marijuana daily or weekly.
or like habitual.
Correct. So they all had used it. They tended to use it at least once a week. Most of them were using it at least once a day.
Okay, I know. So what about if somebody just smoked marijuana once? How long will that THC and everything
So
still?
now they will have very little drug in their system.
Yes.
And so within usually a week or less, they usually be clean. Sometimes even just 3 days, because of the false negative. They might have a few drops in their system, but it'll come back as negative. So, but again, that person should always take their own drug test if they're concerned.
Okay.
And the people sometimes, they'll smuggle in synthetic urine, things like that, which you can do. But if they have somebody, you have to lift your shirt up above your shoulders and you have to pull your pants down below your knees, and then you have to go. So if you have like it smuggled in, it's going to get pretty hard to smuggle it in under those circumstances, like a military.
Yeah, I've seen one guy one time. He had it like in a, because just to keep it warm, he taped it around his leg, and then
Right.
like.
But that's why if you have to lift your shirt up to your shoulders and you have to pull your pants down to your knees, like where are you gonna?
I know.
Where are you gonna put it?
I know.
And then even if you put it in your rectum, there's gonna be a little tube or something coming out, right? That you gotta get it into the cup, right? So and then right, so it's like same thing with those Whizinators and things like those, because they still, if it's a test where they're gonna make you pull your pants up or your shirt up and they're gonna monitor it. If it's not a monitored test, then those things can work sometimes. But there are companies, they test for the preservatives in the synthetic, like LabCorp will test for the preservative in the synthetic urine. So even though you can get it synthetic urine, it's clean, you warm it up to body temperature, you smuggle it in, you get it into the thing. If it tests positive for the preservative, you're not supposed to have preservative in your urine. So that means you're trying to scam the test so that you automatically fail the test. Just like if it's not the right temperature, if it's too hot or too cold, you'll fail the test.
Well, it's just like Michael Phelps, remember? Like when.
Oh, he tested positive for marijuana?
Yeah. Well, because they had a picture of him taking
And if you're on, I was an Olympic level athlete. When you're part of the Olympic sanctions, if you're a U.S. athlete, you agree at any time, for any reason, anywhere, they can come and test you.
Oh, okay.
Or you can't compete as an athlete like in the U.S. once you get to that level. So if someone sees Michael Phelps wrong, then the committee can basically show up to his house that night and request a blood test. And they don't do urine, they request blood.
Oh my! And you're Michael Phelps. He's the best swimmer, or
right? So, and you can't deny it.
Never for the United
States. So he got
States.
sanctioned. Didn't he have to skip some meets or something? Didn't he have to skip? He had to miss he had to miss something because of that. He got sanctioned.
Yeah, I think he had to do like a world. He didn't miss any of the Olympics, but I think it was the.
Yeah, because it wasn't an Olympic year, but he was sanctioned. Like nonetheless, I have friends that were. So when the U.S. snowboarders, when the Winter Olympics were here in the U.S.
or soccer,
in Utah, not too long ago, sometime in the last 20 years, and the U.S. snowboarders, they won in every category. They won gold in every category.
But then
they all lost their medals because then they tested positive for marijuana, which isn't even a sport-enhancing drug.
Not Sean Hill though. Not the.
They all tested positive. The whole team lost their medal and went to the next team. I forget who it was. At any rate, so I think that's probably where I'm going to try to end it today because I don't want to go too far over. And I'm going to put Tuesday, I'm going to talk about stimulants,
Okay.
opiates, maybe a little bit about hallucinogens, whatever I can kind of get in there. I won't cram it down your throats, but I'm going to still do that on Tuesday. You guys are going to be working on your own on the alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana chapters. I'm working on this stuff. I thought this stuff would be a lot harder to read about drug tests and metabolites. And also the stimulants, I think a little bit different. So I'll be lecturing that on Tuesday. And the final is going to be all of this, right? This pharmacokinetics, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and whatever I cover on Tuesday. And then it'll be a wrap. This semester just went.
Oh, and also, Professor, now for that, at the very beginning, you said that you were going to send out something about you wanted feedback from us.
Yeah, I'm going to put up a survey. I'll have it up sometime between now and the final. I just have to have time to make it. I actually have to type out the questions and then generate it and then make a page and then drop it into the module so that you can have it.
Yeah, no rush, really.
But I do want feedback. Even if I have to do it after the final, please try to do it because it's the only way I can tell what's working, what's not working. And I'm doing a lot of trial and error here myself. And I'm setting up, I'm going to have 3 sections of Bio 185 in the fall, and I'm going to have 2 sections of Bio 100. And what I decide to do with those classes is very much going to be reflecting on what I felt worked or didn't work this summer. I realized the pace of 6 weeks was incredibly fast.
You did good though.
But it's the first time I've done the drug class in 6 weeks. That was I done it in 7.
And it was online, especially, and you were going to taking that other class, and you got
Taking that class. But I'm excited though. I told you guys.
No.
I got my certificate.
Yeah, what percentage you get?
Without bonus points, I had a 97% average.
Look at you. You're acting like you're smart.
Oh, I tried so hard, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to stop recording. If you guys need to go, it's fine. I'll do some office hours.